Sound checks. Everybody loves sound checks. Have you ever gone to a sound check and everything sounds great at a sound check, but as soon as you do actually play your show, not too long later when the place fills up with people, it sounds completely different? Stay tuned and I'll tell you why. Hey everybody, it's Nick. Welcome back to the One Guitarist channel. Today I'm going to talk about sound checks and prepping for shows. I like to get a little bit more into details about prepping at some point, but today I'm just the regular, normal prep stuff I want to talk about. First of all, you want to make sure that you have all your stuff for your show. You have your guitar or your guitars, depending on what you're taking. You have extra picks. You have extra strings in case you break one, some way to quickly change them. Like if you have a string winder, you might want to bring that. Also make sure you bring extra cords. If you're going to bring a separate amp, which you, depending on the level of your show, if you need like a separate amp or a couple different amps, make sure you bring those. If you're not taking an extra amp, you might want to have some kind of a backup in case your amp goes down. Like I end up taking this pod sometimes. I'll take that to shows sometimes in case something happens with my amp or something's goofy with it. I can plug that straight into a PA, don't have any problems with it, and it sounds really good. You also want to make sure you bring a tuner, either a pedal tuner, clip-on tuner, or something that you can easily tune between shows. If you've just changed your strings on your guitar recently, there's a pretty good chance for the first couple songs it's going to start going out of tune because your strings aren't fully stretched out. So you want to make sure you have a tuner on you to be able to tune in between songs here or there, maybe every third or fourth song, definitely between sets. So now getting back to the EQ thing and why things sound different at sound checks than they do when people are in there. Typically, depending on your venue, if you're doing a sound check, you're doing it when there's almost nobody in there. So what ends up happening? The acoustics are very different. You have a lot more reflections, a lot more hard surfaces, a lot more things to bounce off of. What does that mean? It's a little more trebly. It just sounds different. You have a different natural reverb. And you EQ all your amps and get your effects to sound, and your PA to sound really good in that environment. However, when it loads up with people, whether it's 15, few hundred people, what ends up happening? Well, you have a whole lot of warm bodies and all those hard surfaces that are in there for your sound to bounce off. They don't have that anymore. So things sound a lot bassier. They sound more muddy. All of a sudden, what sounded great earlier sounds like crappy and muddy, and it sounds completely different when people are in there. Also, people are loud. If you're like in a rock band or something, you're really jamming, people are kind of drinking and they're talking and shouting and laughing and bottles clinking and things all over the place. So that, in addition to the fact that there's bodies in there soaking up a lot of the bass, it's going to completely change the sound that you're in. So, and the way that your system sounds. So just keep that in mind when you're doing sound checks, depending on how many people you expect to be there, the type of the venue. EQ it really well, but be aware that you're probably going to need to adjust a little bit here and there. You're probably going to need to add a little more treble or take some of the bass off after the first couple of songs if you haven't noticed it already. If you have a pretty good sound man, they kind of already know their venue and they either will accommodate for that when they do the sound for you, or they'll adjust it accordingly. You might need to EQ it just a little bit differently if you haven't played that venue. That's about that. Real quick tip for sound checks and prepping for gear. Let me know your favorite tips for prepping for gear or anything, any war stories or horror stories that you've had during really good sound checks or bad sound checks in the comments below. Thanks. Subscribe if you haven't already because I got a lot of cool stuff coming up. Big board full of stuff. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.